Welcome to Barbara's Bulletin, the podcast where we bring you the latest news and updates from around the world. We're starting off with a significant development in the United States, where a federal judge has blocked the deportation of a Palestinian graduate student who was involved in organizing protests at Columbia University against Israel's war in Gaza. Mohsen Madawi, a legal permanent resident of the U.S. since 2015, was arrested by immigration agents in 2025 while attending an interview to become a U.S. citizen. According to reports, Judge Nina Froese questioned the authenticity of a document purportedly signed by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, which stated that Madawi's activism could undermine the Middle East peace process. The judge ruled that the Trump administration did not provide sufficient evidence to justify Madawi's deportation. This decision marks a setback for the U.S. government's efforts to crack down on pro-Palestinian campus activists. The Trump administration has been trying to deport several students who have criticized Israel's response to the conflict in Gaza, citing concerns about national security and foreign policy interests. Madawi's lawyers have hailed the ruling as a victory for free speech and due process. In a statement, Madawi expressed his gratitude to the court for upholding his right to speak out for peace and justice. It's worth noting that this case is part of a broader debate about the limits of free speech on college campuses and the role of the U.S. government in regulating political activism. We'll be following this story closely and bringing you updates as more information becomes available. We'll be right back with more of today's top news on Barbara's Bulletin. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. As we continue to explore the complexities of global events, we turn our attention to a fascinating and intricate tale of international intrigue, maritime law, and economic sanctions. The story involves oil tankers suspected of belonging to Russia's so-called shadow fleet, which have been making headlines in recent weeks. According to reports from reputable sources such as the Moscow Times and the New York Times, these vessels are believed to be involved in transporting Russian oil in violation of a crude price cap imposed by Western countries and the G7 over the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It's a clever tactic, really. These ships frequently change the flags they fly and sometimes sail under invalid registrations to evade monitoring and enforcement. We've seen two notable cases recently: the release of the oil tanker Grinch by France after its owner paid a multi-million-euro fine, and the detention of another Russian-linked tanker, Boracay, which claimed to be registered in Benin. The captain of the Boracay is scheduled to stand trial in France next week. Now, it's essential to approach this story with nuance and balance. Russia has condemned these actions as piracy, while Western countries see them as a necessary measure to enforce sanctions and limit Russia's ability to fund its war efforts. The European Union currently lists 598 vessels suspected of belonging to Russia's shadow fleet, barring them from European ports and maritime services. As we navigate this complex web of international relations, economic interests, and maritime law, it's crucial to consider multiple perspectives and avoid jumping to conclusions. We must also recognize the potential implications for global trade, energy security, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. As we continue to follow this story, we'll be keeping a close eye on developments and bringing you updates as more information becomes available. For now, it's clear that the world is watching these events unfold with great interest and concern. Welcome back to Barbara's Bulletin. As we wrap up today's show, I want to bring to your attention a critical situation unfolding in Cuba. The island nation is facing its worst energy crisis in years, driven largely by the United States oil blockade. The embargo, which has been in place for over 60 years, has restricted Cuba's access to oil and fuel shipments, causing widespread shortages and disruptions to the power grid. This has had a devastating impact on the country's healthcare, education, and transportation sectors. The situation has been further exacerbated by the Trump administration's executive order permitting tariffs on countries that supply Cuba with oil. Many critics argue that this policy could have dire consequences for Cuban civilians. In response to the crisis, over 100 Cuban cultural leaders, including artists, curators, and intellectuals, have issued a public appeal for international intervention. They argue that the U.S. oil blockade has made efforts to stabilize the humanitarian crisis all but impossible. The letter, titled "Cuba is Not a Threat," calls for solidarity and support from the global community, emphasizing that Cuba's greatest wealth lies in its people and their resilience through creativity and knowledge. It's essential to acknowledge the complexity of this issue and the various perspectives involved. While some argue that the embargo is necessary to pressure the Cuban government into adopting democratic reforms, others see it as a form of collective punishment that hurts the most vulnerable members of society. As we consider the situation in Cuba, it's crucial to approach the topic with empathy and understanding. The Cuban people are facing significant challenges, and it's essential to recognize their struggles and support their right to self-determination. That's all for today's Barbara's Bulletin. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay engaged.